Fox 7. We have a mic level coming in. Check 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. Anyone else needs an extra mic check? Now is the time to get it. 1 2 1 2. One, two, three, four. 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 4. This is the mic. Mic check for all the studio people. 1 2 3. 1 2 3. Producers, directors. You good? All righty. All right. We're all good. Fox 7, you good? You good with the sound? All right.
Sit it underneath, probably.
It's not stable.
Oh, it's not?
Just sit it on top.
Okay.
It's not stable.
Put that on my face. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jackie Spear. I am the chair of the Military Personnel Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee, and I'm joined here today by a number of my colleagues, all of whom will have opening statements to make. We have embarked on this trip to Fort Hood to do an investigation on the deaths of a number of service members that have either gone unsolved or that have caused great concern for all of us. I don't think I will ever forget, for the rest of my life, walking the path that Vanessa Guillen walked to her murder, and to stand in that arms room and realize that her life was taken from her in that particular location. Behind me is the sign that says Fort Hood, the great place. I don't think any of us feel that we can call it a great place right now. I believe that there are serious cultural and safety issues at this base that we must address. A number of service members and spouses talked to us today, among others, and I'm just going to read to you a couple of the comments that have been made. I don't feel safe on the base. They're always pushing for numbers, which is dehumanizing. Fort Hood is where careers go to die. I'm afraid I will find my husband hanging in the shower. I'm deeply concerned about the soldiers here, and I'm deeply concerned about their families. Morale is low and battle rhythm is high. Many have said to us that they haven't seen their families in a year. The crime rate is the worst in the Army. So as we look at the tragic deaths of Specialist Guillen, Specialist Morales, Sergeant Fernandez, and Private First Class Rosencrantz, among many others, we have to ask the question, what has gone wrong? One of the things that I believe has gone wrong is that the Criminal Investigation Division is ill-equipped to do the job it is charged to do. I'm deeply concerned that the arms room was never subject to a forensic review until after Vanessa Guillen's body was found on June 30th, some 2 months after she disappeared. I'm concerned that never was Specialist Robinson identified as a person of interest or a subject of this investigation. In fact, on the day in which he took his life, June 30th, he was being observed not because he was a person of interest or a potential subject. He was being observed because he was violating the COVID quarantine. It's very important that we beef up efforts to provide communications with next of kin. It's very important for us to recognize that the process that exists as it relates to identifying a soldier as AWOL or missing must be changed so that the resources can be put in place to communicate with the family and to provide resources to the family as these individuals are attempted to be found. So that's just a checklist of what we know so far. We have more meetings today and tonight, and we will also be going to a number of the sites where the murders took place tomorrow. It's now my pleasure to introduce the Vice Chair of the Military Personnel Subcommittee, Gil Cisneros, a member from California.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As she said, I'm Congressman Gil Cisneros. I represent California's 39th District. You know, we came here today to get answers, but I feel like we not only don't have these answers, but now we have more questions. We know that Vanessa Guillen had told her parents that she didn't like it here. We've heard that same story from other soldiers that are here today. We know that she had talked about how she had been sexually harassed. And we had also heard that story from other soldiers here today, and that same feeling of, why do I need to report it, because nothing's going to get done. We went and saw where Vanessa lived, and I had never been so, I guess, taken aback in my life and seen the worst barracks I think I've ever seen in my life. And it's no wonder we have so many soldiers. Sorry, I was in the Navy. I keep thinking sailors, but so many soldiers and their families who are worried about morale and the mental, toughness of their soldiers, right? Are they depressed or not? And so there is a lot of work that needs to be done here on this base. There are problems with base housing. There are problems with the barracks. There are morale issues here. This command here at Fort Hood is going to have a lot of work ahead of them in order to turn things around because, as the chairwoman said, this is not a good place right now, and we need to make sure, as members of Congress and as part of this committee, the Armed Services Committee, we need to make sure that we oversee the changes that need to occur here and that they're taking place, but not only here at Fort Hood, but for the Army and the entire military. So again, this is it was just very upsetting to see what we were doing today. There's just more questions that need to be answered now, and we need to make sure that we continue this oversight to get those answers. But thank you very much for being here, and I now will turn it over to my colleague from Colorado, Jason Crow.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Chairwoman Spear, for leading this really important delegation for our military and our country. And thank you to all my colleagues from Congress from paying attention and leading on this important issue. My name is Jason Crow. I'm from Colorado. And in addition to being a member of the House Armed Services Committee, I'm a veteran of the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, a former soldier. So I look at this issue more as a soldier and as a veteran than I do as a member of Congress. The simple fact of the matter is our young men and women, they deserve nothing but the best. These are young men and women who raised their right hand, took the oath, and have committed to giving their lives, if necessary, in defense of our country and our ideals and our national security. And we deserve to make sure that we're giving them the best, and that they can do so in safety and security. Our soldiers have enough to worry about. They shouldn't be having to worry about whether or not their housing is safe and secure, whether there's mold growing in their housing, whether there's going to be a murder on base, or whether their personal safety and welfare is at risk. Protecting our nation's finest is one of our most solemn responsibilities. In our system, it's the United States Congress that decides what type of military our nation will have. So that's why we are here today to say that we can and we must do better for our fine young men and women. And I will say that I was encouraged by the sense of urgency that I heard out of some of the new command structure. They certainly told us the right things, and I hope that they were able to follow through on that. But we will be keeping them accountable. We will be making sure that the initiatives that they're launching, that they follow through on those, because at the end of the day, the proof will be in the results. And we look forward to working with the Department of Defense and the commanders of this base and others throughout the military to make sure that we get those results. Thank you.
Now we'll hear from Congresswoman Katherine Clark from the state of Massachusetts.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Spear, for bringing us here today and for allowing us to witness firsthand what is happening here at Fort Hood. I come from Massachusetts, and that was the home of Sergeant Elder Fernandez. And we want to have answers for his family and for all the families who have sent their sons and daughters to Fort Hood. Because of the sacrifice of those who serve our country, we have a great responsibility to them. To see the hooks today, when we went to Vanessa Guillen's room, where she hung the spurs that she earned. Today's a Friday, the traditional day where she would have worn them, was heartbreaking. And as Chairwoman Spear said, to retrace her steps to her death was a chilling walk that I won't forget. But it has deepened all of our commitment to treat these patriots with the care that they deserve, to end their fear of reporting sexual assault and harassment, to increase the acknowledgement and accountability for crimes and suicides on this post. We cannot have a culture where a soldier is hanging from a bridge in plain view of other soldiers and it is never acknowledged. That compounds trauma by indifference. We cannot house our soldiers in deplorable conditions. I never want to hear from another young mom like we did today that the black mold had even permeated her baby's crib's mattress. I am grateful for the leadership that we met today that expressed their intention to rebuild trust, to rebuild security on this post. And we extend our hand to them in partnership. But change must come, and we are going to insist upon it. And so I thank again all of my colleagues for being here, because we have to shed a light on what is happening. And one of my tremendous colleagues who has been so involved in what has happened and working with Vanessa's family, it is my pleasure to bring to the podium Sylvia Garcia of Houston, Texas.
Thank you, Congresswoman Clark, and thank you, Chairwoman Spear, for leading this delegation. And I just want to set the record straight that she's been with me from the very beginning. The minute I called her about the Vanessa Guillen case, she guided me. She was there to support me. And together with her on Wednesday, we filed the Vanessa Guillen, I Am Vanessa Guillen bill that will address many of the concerns that arose out of the case of Vanessa Guillen. But that's only the beginning. All of my colleagues have mentioned a lot of other things that are going on here in Fort Hood. Frankly, it's beginning to feel to me that since I was here on June 23rd, many of y'all were here, I'm convinced now that there's something in the water at Fort Hood. And it's going to be up to us as members of Congress. It's going to be up to you as members of the press. It's going to be up to the parents and the families and the public to continue the pressure to make sure that we get to the bottom of what is going on here and that we do everything humanly possible to address what is going on so that it never ever happens again. I want to make sure we don't forget Vanessa Guillen. But I also want to make sure that we don't forget Elder Fernandez, Gregory Morales, Brandon Rosecrans, Freddie de la Cruz, Shelby Jones, Minor Marta, Michelle Wardrobe, Michael Wardrobe, and most recently, Francisco Hernandez Vargas. That is 9 deaths or missing persons or some suspicious death of soldiers from Fort Hood, either on post or off post. And quite frankly, to some of us, it doesn't matter if it was on post or off post. They're soldiers. Their families entrusted them to the United States Army and to the United States of America, brought them here and to make them soldiers. They expected them to be protected. They expected them to be safe. But that trust that those families put in the Army has been betrayed. That trust that America places on the United States Army has been betrayed. We need to make sure that they make good on that trust. And I too am heartened by the new command, but I'm going to wait and see, because we can move forward, but we cannot erase the past and we cannot forget this 9 names. We've got to make sure that we remember that their sons, their daughters, their nieces, their nephews, their neighbors, they're Americans. We need to make sure that we do justice for all of them, and we need to make sure that it just never ever happens again. With that, I will yield back to the chairwoman.
Finally, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, also from Massachusetts, will close this out.
Well, we come here today with heavy hearts but resolved ones, that even when the headlines fade, that our conviction will not. James Baldwin said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And today we are here to confront, to face the systemic hurt occurring here at Fort Hood. In the last year alone, 5 homicides, 7 suicides, 8 accidental deaths, 2 by illness, and 5 under investigation. What is going on at Fort Hood? We are desperate to know. Families are desperate to know how their loved ones met such a tragic or violent fate. Their loved ones who were patriots, who wanted to serve their country, to defend our Constitution, who have made selfless sacrifice to keep all of us safe, but whom we have failed to keep safe, who defend our Constitution so that we can have freedom of speech, but many of them are afraid to speak out about the sexual misconduct, harassment, assault that they have experienced. And when hurt and violations in the most egregious ways have occurred, that there have been no clear avenues for healing or for justice. Now, I'm not talking about what works on paper. We're talking about what works in real life and has an integrity to it and a safety to it and is predictable and gets victims on a pathway to healing and to justice. Instead, their traumas are often met with more trauma. A culture here that is systemic and must change. Now, I spoke, I'm from Massachusetts, and I'm here in partnership with my colleagues in the Massachusetts delegation, Congressman Lynch, who represents Brockton, which is the community that Sergeant Elder Fernandez is from. I'm here with Katherine Clark, and I also want to acknowledge the good work of our state representative, Liz Miranda, who's also worked very closely with the family. I spoke with Elder's aunt yesterday, and I began the conversation by saying that we would get justice for her nephew. But the truth is, there can never be justice for Private First Class Vanessa Guillen's family, or for Sergeant Elder Fernandez's family, or for Private Gregory Waddell Morales, because true justice would mean that they would still be here. There, however, must be accountability. So in addition to coming from the Commonwealth and representing Massachusetts, I'm also here as a member of the Oversight Committee in an investigative capacity to ask the questions. And truthfully, after today, I have more questions than I do answers. But it is our charge to be in efficient and effective pursuit of the truth. That is exactly what we will do. We will not go AWOL on these dedicated servicemen and women or the surviving family members of victims. And I want to thank our chair, Congresswoman Spear, and I want to thank Congresswoman Garcia, both of you, for your steadfast leadership on behalf of all these issues, but in particular for the Guillen family. And we must pass the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act. And I think Representative Garcia was saying that in 2 weeks she would have turned 21 years old.
It would be a nice birthday present,
September 30th. And so with that, I yield and I'll turn it back to our chair.
Thank you. Are there questions? Yes.
I've got a main question and a follow-up, if I may.
All right.
So, my name is Thad Immerman. I'm with the Killeen Daily Herald. So with the most recent death of Private G, that brings the total to, this year to 28. That includes Private Morales, because of when his date of death was, when he was found. Now, 28 deaths is not unusual for Fort Hood. They've had higher in the past few years. What took Congress so long to come out here? Why is this year so much different than previous years when the death rate is still lower than it has been in the last few years?
What brought us here was the grisly murder of Vanessa Guillen. What brought us here is the fact that a sergeant was sexually harassed and bullied and took his life. What brought us here was that Specialist Morales was missing as of August last year, and whose body was not found until June. So regardless of what the numbers are, we're here today. And I can commit to you that we are going to make this base a safe place for men and women to serve. I can commit to you that we are going to make sure that the conditions under which families are housed here is going to improve, and that service members who are in barracks here are going to have decent accommodations.
And my follow-up, so you mentioned there were 5 homicides this year. One of them, of course, is the by a man from out of state. Another was, they're just all completely different circumstances. So how are they all rolled into one, and how do they fall under, as a fault of Fort Hood leadership?
I think any death of any service member needs to be investigated. And the spate of murders and suicides and unusual and unsolved deaths of service members here at Fort Hood is something that we have just begun to investigate. Absolutely. Everyone can speak up.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that question. And you actually make a very good, larger point, and that is this is not just a problem from this year. This is a larger problem that has existed for multiple years that, to me, indicates not just a one-time increase or surge of cases, but a larger cultural or climate challenge. And indeed, even the Army itself has acknowledged that. Secretary McCarthy has come right out and said there's a problem at Fort Hood, that the numbers are higher here per capita than they are any place else in the military. So I'm glad to see that the Army and the civilian leadership has acknowledged that problem, and now it's time to take action to actually fix it.
And just, again, I want to reiterate that these military families are serving right alongside their spouses. And so we heard from a young family, from a young wife and mother today, that in fact she keeps a gun, instead of it being in a lockbox, she keeps it in easy access and proximity because of the constant fear that she is living in. So again, there is much that has to be done to restore the sense of communal safety here.
Yes.
Baron Roy, 6 News. Earlier was mentioned that changes need to take place here, and I want to hear from every single one of you in this. Is every single one of you confident in the new regime to make sure that they can oversee the changes that need to take place in Fort Hood?
So Major General Richardson has made the statement to us today that he wants to see trust restored among his soldiers, that his first and foremost obligation is to take care of the soldiers here. And he intends to carry on for the next year a massive process by which that will take place. Regardless of whether or not he succeeds, we are going to be back. We have an obligation to continue this investigation and to assess the change in culture and the change in safety. And that is, paramount in terms of our responsibility as members of Congress and certainly on the Military Personnel Subcommittee. Katherine?
As I said earlier, we extend our hand in partnership to this new command, and I believe them when they say they want to bring change, they want to reestablish trust. But a program isn't going to do it. A short period of time isn't going to fix it. These are deep systemic problems that we have just begun to explore. And so it is true. These high crime rates have existed for years. This is not new. You don't get this sort of the culture of fear and anxiety, a fear of speaking out for reprisal overnight, and it's not going to be fixed overnight. But it is also, we have no intention of going anywhere. This is so important to who we are as a country, how we care for our sons and daughters who put on the uniform matters. And that's why we are going to see this through until we restore security here at Fort Hood.
Well, as I said earlier, first of all, I was really pleased that there was a change in command, but just removing the top doesn't get to the whole root of the problem. So I think as a Congress, we have to continue in a robust fashion our oversight to make sure that the commitments that the new command make today, moving forward, that they do what they say they promise to do. And I can assure you that we've got a very, very aggressive and engaged chairwoman. She's going to make sure that we all do. I will make sure that we do, because I'm still advocating for Vanessa Guillen. And as of Wednesday, we were called by a family from New York that has faced same or similar problems with Vanessa Guillen's family in communication and things of finding out what is going on with their son's case. So we've got to stay on it. You know, not just us as members of Congress, but the families. And I think if we all work together with that common goal that we're going to be here to make sure that this is a great place, but more importantly, a safe place where we're training our protectors while we're protecting them. Because in the end, remember, once again, I mean, it's about trust, and it's about the service to our country and the security of our nation. So we've got to do it, and I can assure you that we will stay on top of it to make sure that they do.
Yeah, I appreciate your question, because it draws a distinction between being encouraged by the things that we may have heard and that we did hear versus trust and confidence. Trust and confidence is earned over time, and it's earned by the results. I was encouraged by what I heard from General Richardson and Sergeant Major Burgoyne because they did demonstrate the first step to leadership for me, and that first step to leadership is acknowledgement of a problem and the commitment to solve it, which not every leader has in this situation done. So I was encouraged by that. Whether or not they can fulfill that promise, of course, will be seen in the months and years ahead. And then the last thing I will say, military-wide, there's a challenge as we focus the transition of our force, as we draw down Iraq and Afghanistan and change the focus of the military. You have an entire generation of mid-level and junior leaders that have spent the last 2 decades at war. And learning how to lead in a garrison environment is different than leading on the battlefield in many respects. So we have to work with the department and work with leaders to give them the resources to help them train those young leaders to be effective leaders in a garrison environment and to set the right tone.
Well, I associate myself with all the comments already said by my colleagues. I'm encouraged as well. These were difficult conversations, courageous conversations, but now we want to see courageous action. And I also just I want to continue to reiterate that the definition of safety is not only protection from domestic violence or sexual harassment or murder or sexual assault, to live in an environment where you feel dehumanized, a culture, and in a physical space that is demoralizing, like the subpar housing conditions that we were provided photos of, is also violent. So that safety is something that has to be addressed holistically. I felt ashamed, deeply, deeply troubled and ashamed by what was shared by these military spouses, the exposure to asbestos, to black mold, to insects, to rodents. So these are things that can be addressed right away that also support the broader culture systemic changes that we want to do, or that must happen.
Yes.
So you've given Army leaders until October 2nd to provide documents of the deaths of the recent soldiers and the death of Vanessa Guillen. Were you able to get those documents today?
No, we didn't get those documents today. Let me just add to this last question. I've visited many bases in our country. I have never seen barracks as bad as the barracks here at Fort Hood. I think Fort Hood has been neglected. I'm not going to point fingers, but I am going to say that we have got to redouble our financing for military construction, for housing for families here at Fort Hood and across the basis in this country. When you realize that we spend $760 billion a year on the Department of Defense, and we have families and service members living in conditions that we saw today, there is something fundamentally wrong, and it starts at the top. And we're going to make sure that the Secretary of the Department of Defense recognizes his obligation to make sure that the service members and their families have a habitable environment in which to live. Yes?
Y'all are talking about the physical conditions of how they're living, but what about mental health and also sexual, people that are dealing with sexual assault and harassment? How are you helping those people so they feel safe enough to come forward?
So in terms of mental health, we've had a number of conversations today about mental health and the services and lack thereof and the proper training that should be provided to those that assist persons in crisis. I think throughout the military, we would say that the mental health services are not what they should be. In terms of sexual assault and sexual harassment, the bill that has been introduced that will be taken up in the House later this month or before we recess is a bill specifically to give confidence to sexual harassment and sexual assault victims that they are not going to be retaliated against. And the way you make sure that happens is by taking the decisions as to whether or not a case is going to be referred for investigation and prosecution, take it out of the chain of command. And in this bill, we create a chief prosecutor and an independent investigations unit to evaluate these cases. And we also provide a provision whereby those who have been sexually assaulted or harassed can file a claim in the Department of Defense and be compensated. And we ask for the General Accountability Office to review the SHARP programs that exist within the military, to evaluate their effectiveness, and then furthermore to look at the whole process of identifying a soldier as AWOL or missing.
Chairwoman, certainly the deaths of soldiers at Fort Hood or any other base is not a political issue, but obviously this delegation today is all Democrats. Is there a reason, is there bipartisan support for this movement?
So there are now about 125 members that have co-sponsored the bill, and about 10 of them are Republicans. So it is a bipartisan bill. I am certain that we are going to have more Republicans join in this effort. And I think that we would have had Republicans join us, but for the fact that they had personal responsibilities that prevented them from joining us here today. Of course. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted y'all to remember that when I was here June 23rd, we had a representative of Senator Cruz's office. We had a visit with Senator Cornyn, and we had the district director for Representative Carter, and we've had the district director for, is it Cartwright? It's also it. The two reps from this area were represented also. So frankly, in that group, I was the only Democrat. So I think that responds to your question that when it comes to protecting our soldiers, that's a no-brainer for most people. I mean, it's across the board. Our veterans get bipartisan support on almost all the bills that we file. So I think that the number will grow. She's got a co-sponsor of her bill that is a Republican from Oklahoma. And we're getting every day more and more people as co-sponsors. And I can assure you it will be a very, very good bipartisan bill. And y'all get everyone to vote for it, please.
I have a question for Representative Clark and I think Representative
Sure.
as well. You guys both called the issues here systemic and part of the culture. So from Fort Hood's end, how do you change that? How do you change anything that's systemic or change the culture here?
You do it by what my colleague Ayanna Pressley said. You identify the problem and you address it also systemically. First, we have to talk about what's happening here, that it's not just these horrible murders and suicides, but it is all of the sexual assaults that aren't being reported. Why is that? How can we streamline regulations so that they can be reported more easily? All of these things have to be looked at in a comprehensive way because we can't just take one piece of this. Everything is so tied in. How we respond to a suicide is directly related to how we are funding mental health services, how we are addressing the mental health needs of the soldiers at this post in a time of quarantine and isolation. As my colleagues mentioned, many of them haven't gone home for over a year. So we have to systemically come at this, and we will do it through looking at how criminal investigations are run, how mental health and physical health services are provided, how we provide security and accountability. It starts at the top, but we have to make sure that it gets to every single soldier and they feel secure here.
Yeah, I'll answer that question as a platoon leader, not as a congressman. I led 3 different platoons, infantry platoons, in my time in the service. And a couple of the things I learned very early on is that attention to detail and command climate really matter a lot. That in the military, the small things are big, right? And it starts with what you take seriously, and it starts with the quarters, right? And that's why we put a lot of emphasis here on the barracks and living quarters. I took pictures, actually, of things that really shocked me. And I've seen a lot of barracks in my day. And, I'm looking at a picture here of a wasp nest in a stairwell in a barracks, spider webs, splattered paint on walls. We have pictures of blinds. I don't think I saw a set of blinds on any of the rooms that weren't falling down, literally just hanging down. And a classroom in a basement with chairs that didn't have legs and didn't have coverings on them, that's shameful. It really is. The fact that we ask what we ask of these men and women to sacrifice so much, and what I saw was hard for me to see today. So the command has a big job in front of it, that it has to pay attention to the details and be out in all of the units and fix this stuff quickly to set a different tone.
Let me just add one thing here. Probably the most convincing statement that Major General Richardson made was that he's going to get out of the headquarters. In Silicon Valley, it's called MWBA, Managing by Walking Around. And unless he and his leadership is out and talking with the soldiers and their families, they will not have a pulse on what needs to happen here in terms of systemic change. All right, any last question? All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it.